and good afternoon. It is Friday, and that means it's time for our Lunch and Learn. Now, today we're going to be talking about one of my absolute favorite beverages, coffee. And coffee does get a bad rap. And this is going to be, there's some good points and some bad points, but basically it's just clarification about what coffee can and cannot do for you. So raise your hand if you think that coffee gives you energy. Okay, that's not me. My hand is not raised. Okay, for me, coffee is a ritual. I enjoy, tell you a funny story. I did not make coffee last night. I was tired. I fell asleep on the couch, got up and went to bed, didn't even think about, oh, Steve's home on Fridays. I need to put coffee in the coffee maker and set the coffee to be done when we get up. Didn't do that. Woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning knowing I didn't make the coffee, and it was like, oh, it's going to take 10 minutes to make. I'm not going to get up and make it now, which I did make it this morning, and I do enjoy it. It is a ritual. I like the smell. I like the warmth in my hand. I like the taste. To me, it's not energizing as much as comforting because it is just a morning ritual. Now, a lot of you also will share in that ritual, but you may be under the impression that it gives you energy. It does not give you energy. It does not give you that. That is an illusion. All right. When you drink coffee, you're actually borrowing energy from your body's fuel reserves. And so you need to know that and limit the amount of coffee that you have. Otherwise, you will get into a negative feedback loop, which is going to be some, it's going to cause all kinds of problems. We're going to talk about that. So caffeine is generally a brain stimulant. This is according to Edward Giovannucci, I hope I said that right, professor of nutrition and epidemiology at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. In its pure form, it is a purine alkaloid appearing as a bitter white powder. Okay. Besides coffee beans, caffeine is found in more than 60 plants around the world, including tea leaves, guarana berries, and cacao leaves. Beans, sorry. Caffeine counteracts a molecule in the body called adenosine, which makes us sleepy. Now, the adenosine levels in our brain are low when we wake up, but gradually accumulate throughout the day. As adenosine increasingly binds to the receptors, it signals the brain that rest is needed, causing us to feel drowsy. During sleep, adenosine is cleared and the cycle repeats itself. Insufficient sleep leads to a buildup of adenosine and increased receptor sensitivity, which explains the grogginess and sluggishness that we feel in the morning. So caffeine has a structure similar to adenosine, which allows it to block the chemical from being received into the receptors, and the caffeine takes its place. This prevents the brain from receiving the drowsiness signals, which is why we feel alert, and it is why we feel energized when we have a cup of coffee. All right. Adenosine not only signals drowsiness, but it also suppresses brain cell activity. When caffeine blocks adenosine, it indirectly stimulates the central nervous system. It triggers the release of various biochemicals, including dopamine, glutamate, norepinephrine, and cortisol, resulting in enhanced alertness, mood, and cognitive function. So a 2020 meta-analysis involving multiple studies indicate that caffeine intake can somewhat enhance cognitive work and driving performance in sleep-deprived individuals. The feeling of the energy boost from drinking coffee is real, says Cindy Chan Phillips, who is a registered dietitian. In addition to boosting energy, caffeine can enhance physical strength and sports performance. A randomized trial found that athletes who consume coffee could use and metabolize oxygen more efficiently, increasing their maximal heart rate and oxygen uptake. In a review by the International Society of Sports Nutrition reported that consuming 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight, enhances muscle endurance, strength, and aerobic activity. So I'm going to give you that again if you wanted to write that down. 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight enhanced muscle strength, endurance, and aerobic capacity. Similarly, in a 2022 review, showed that caffeine consumption extended the runner's endurance by 17%, improving their running speed compared to those who did not consume caffeine. So what you need to know is when you have caffeine, and if you're using it as an energy boost, that what you're doing is you're borrowing from your energy that you have for later on in the day. And so this might be why people have coffee in the afternoon as a pick-me-up, because they've overindulged when they are earlier in the morning. So a boost of caffeine is fundamentally the result of reduced fatigue signals rather than a direct increase in energy level. This is according to Mary Kirsten, who is a nutritionist and health coach at the ART Health Solutions. Food provides energy, but caffeine does not. A cup of black coffee contains fewer than 5 calories, and the energy it provides is essentially borrowed from the body. Caffeine keeps you alert by blocking the adenosine, but it is temporary. And this is according to Melissa Ann Press, who is a registered dietitian with a doctorate in clinical nutrition from Rutgers University. Rather than eliminating the adenosine that causes the fatigue, the caffeine just masks its presence in the body for a short time. Once the caffeine wears off, the accumulated adenosine runs into the cells, and that's why you have drowsiness. This is what we call a coffee crash. So you don't really want to have a coffee crash. So regular coffee consumption increases the number of adenosine receptors in the brain, making the body less sensitive to caffeine, meaning it requires more caffeine to have the same effect. Now, again, personally, I have a cup of coffee in the morning because I love the ritual of it. The smell, the touch, the taste, the warmth, all the things, okay? I do not say, oh, I'm tired, I need a cup of coffee. I never say that. I hardly ever get tired. I mean, I did tell you I fell asleep on the couch last night. So by the end of the day, when I'm supposed to be tired, I am tired. But I'm not one of those persons that is going to reach for a cup of coffee in the afternoon as a pick-me-up. Now, if you want to come and see me and you want to bring me a cup of coffee, I will happily indulge. But that's not something that I need in order to boost my energy levels. I don't overindulge in coffee, and so I don't need that. So when we are, let me figure out a way to say this so it sounds logical, right? So we've got two different parts of our central nervous system, right? We've got our sympathetic nervous system. We've got our parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is what gets turned on when we are fighting for our lives, when we are worried about stress, when we're under stress, all those kind of things. Our sympathetic nervous system is what is turned on. Back in the old days when we were running away from saber-toothed tigers, yes, we need that. We need that burst of adrenaline. We need all the things that we need so that we can get the job done because we are under stress and we are running for our lives. Now, in this day and age, in this country, the United States, it's very, very rare for any of us to be in a life or death situation. Forget about driving. That's got its own thing here, especially in the Houston traffic. But normally, we are not running from our lives. Yet, we do live in a very high stress environment. Most of us do. What we need to do is to be aware when we are in that fight or flight, when we are in that sympathetic dominance, because we need to get ourselves out of that because of what we just talked about those chemicals in the brain, the dopamine, the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, and that kind of thing. We don't want to have those in our brain forever and ever. We want to be the people that live in parasympathetic dominance. Peace, rest, recovery, the butterflies are beautiful, all those kind of things. That's where we want to live. Now, I will tell you as a human That's very hard for me. I tend to stay in sympathetic dominance because there's so much I have to do. There's so much I want to do, and I just want to get the most out of every moment. So I typically stay in sympathetic dominance. But because I'm mindful, I listen to my body, and I can tell when stress gets to be too much for me. And I will take something called cortisol right here, which breaks that negative feedback loop. As you can see, it's on my desk because I know that I need to get out of that sympathetic dominance often during the day. So under normal stress, the body enters a fight or flight response during which the adrenal glands produce hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. Excessive caffeine intake produces the same effect. In a clinical trial published by Pharmacology, Biochemistry, and Behavior, found that caffeine intake can increase stress hormone levels in the body, even at rest. The adrenal glands become overworked when the stress hormone levels remain elevated, potentially leading to adrenal fatigue. And this is according to Kirsten that we talked about earlier. Now, your medical doctor will probably tell you that there is no such thing as adrenal fatigue. Well, in holistic land where we live, we do believe in adrenal fatigue. And so I just want to give you a heads up. If you can look in your pupil, just go to the mirror, pull your mirror out, and look at your pupil. If your pupil is very large, okay, there are three things that will cause that. One of them is SSRI. So if you're on antidepressants, you're going to notice that your pupil is larger because of the antidepressants. That's one of the side effects. If you smoke pot, your pupil's going to be large. I think we all know that, right? But if you are exhausted, if you are in adrenal fatigue, also your pupils will be very, very large. So if you're not taking an SSRI and you're not smoking pot, but your pupils are very large, then you know that you have been living in sympathetic dominance for a very long time, and you really need to do something to mitigate those stress hormones in your body. We know that when there is an overabundance of cortisol in the body, we have trouble losing weight. And so that's something that is particularly true for females. And so that might be something that we look at. We want to decrease the amount of cortisol in our bodies. Now, Dr. Kevin Sheppers, might be Sheepers, a doctor of integrative and functional medicine, says that excessive coffee consumption can make the body reliant on it to boost dopamine and adrenaline levels. Abruptly cutting off caffeine consumption can trigger a coming down feeling, resulting in fatigue and even depression. A drop in dopamine will eventually lead to withdrawal symptoms, including headaches, fatigue, and irritability. So if you know someone who is irritable, but they reach for that caffeine in those situations, then they are dealing with adrenal fatigue and they're relying too much on caffeine. Drinking too much caffeine can also interfere with the body's resource allocation. It directs energy toward the heightened alertness rather than long-term repair, potentially impairing muscle recovery, weakening the immune system response, reducing sustained energy supply during endurance activity, especially in those people who are sensitive to caffeine. Consuming caffeine later in the day can also lower sleep quality, hindering cellular repair and increasing long-term health risks. Now, I'll just tell you, as a young woman, it was my very great pleasure to go out for a meal, enjoy a dessert, and a cup of coffee at the end of the meal with friends. As I got older, we're going to say around 50, 55, I noticed that when I did have that cup of coffee after dinner with my dessert, I just couldn't sleep very well. And so this is something that, even though my consumption of coffee is way less than it used to be, okay, I do know that when I consume coffee later in the day, it does impair my sleep. And I know that I need sleep, not only for my cellular repair, but, skin issues and all that kind of stuff. And they don't call it beauty sleep for nothing. All right, so you want to get enough sleep. Caffeine does not give you energy. It borrows from your future energy reserves and thus is a drain on the body. This is according to Dr. Rachel Carlton Abrams, a family practice physician who is also board certified in holistic medicine. Now, she wrote this in her book called Body Wise. I don't know if you have that book. I think I've seen that book. I think I may even have read some of that book. But in that book, she says caffeine does not give you energy. So there's a hidden cost with caffeine. The body, all right, when you have too much caffeine, the body will produce more cortisol, which causes all kinds of problems. Cortisol is an integral part of your biological clock. On waking, cortisol levels rise and peak within the hour before gradually declining throughout the day. The morning surge in cortisol helps us feel alert and prepared to take on the day. Now, if you've ever had a cortisol test, what they will do is they will measure your cortisol throughout the day. So you will have 4 little test tubes, and you spit, you use a saliva, you spit in these test tubes 4 times a day. In the morning when you arise, at lunch, at dinner, and at bedtime. And then they graph how your cortisol is, and if you've got cortisol or adrenal fatigue, your cortisol is going to be messed up. And if your cortisol is messed up, it's going to directly have an effect on your sleep, okay? So if people rely heavily on caffeine to start their mornings, this artificial stimulant can interfere with cortisol's natural function. Many of Ms. Phillips' clients struggle with taking forever to get going, and they have a sluggish circadian wake cycle, and so they rely on caffeine, and that just perpetuates the problem. So if this is you, you want to be smart and not do this, all right? Caffeine actually may stay in your system longer than you realize, Phillips said. Poor night's sleep can give us the feeling of grogginess the following morning, leading to increased coffee consumption to stay awake. For most people, the best time to drink coffee in the morning is around 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. I have my coffee way earlier than that because I get up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, something like that. And so what I really want, as I said, that's part of my morning ritual, looking out the window, getting the first rays of the sunshine with my cup of coffee, and I enjoy that. So in the morning, early in the morning, around the time of 9:30 to 11:30 a.m., the body's natural cortisol levels begin to drop, making this the ideal window to have caffeine to avoid disruption in the cortisol cycle. Generally, 1 to 2 cups of coffee are sufficient to enhance focus and energy. So I do know people, I have family members that keep a pot of coffee on 24/7, and they refill that pot, multiple times a day. They drink coffee, fresh coffee, all day long, which is not good for your immune system. It's not good for your adrenals, which is a hormone producing gland, and all of your endocrine system is connected. And so if you do that, you're running a risk of messing up your endocrine system. So we don't want to do that. Phillips suggests that delaying coffee consumption to about an hour after waking, typically around the time that people get to their office, better aligns with the body's natural rhythms and supports cortisol's normal function. For those who prefer drinking coffee right after waking, she recommends you start with half a cup, save the other cup for later, and you're going to do better with your adrenal function and your cortisol production. Now, that's good advice. I'm just going to be honest. I like my cup of coffee in the morning when I get up, and I'm probably not going to change that. But on the other hand, I am not susceptible to caffeine. I don't overly indulge in caffeine. And after my morning cup, I'm just done for the day, like I said, unless it's a special occasion and that kind of thing. So there are medical concerns if you need caffeine to maintain your energy level. It is a sign that you are developing caffeine dependence, and this is not good. Caffeine dependence is regarded as a clinical disorder. The American Psychiatric Association Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, includes 9 diagnostic criteria for caffeine use disorder, with the following 3 being the most significant. So number 1, a persistent desire or unsuccessful effort to cut down or control caffeine use. So if you are someone who has to have a cup of coffee in her hand all day long, then this might be a problem for you. So this is listed as a clinical disorder. Now, most of us don't think of caffeine as a drug, but it is listed as a clinical disorder if you rely on it too much. Continuing caffeine use, despite knowledge of having a persistent or recurrent physical or psychological problem, is likely to have been caused or exacerbated by caffeine. So think about that. And then the third is the characteristic withdrawal syndrome for caffeine, or caffeine or closely related substance is taken to relieve or avoid withdrawal symptoms. Now this, I know we're talking about coffee, but I also know here in the clinic when we're trying to help people get healthy, one of the things that we will ask them to do is no caffeine, no soda, no alcohol, no coffee, right? We have people that say, I cannot give up my soda because if I do, I will get headaches and that kind of thing. And that is the same thing. It is the caffeine in the soda that's causing that behavior in the body. So it's not just limited to coffee. We're talking about coffee today, but you can have a caffeine problem if you're having an over-reliance on sodas as well. So one example of continued caffeine use despite knowledge that it causes harm is a study of pregnant women who had been advised to quit caffeine during pregnancy. 43% of women who met the criterion for caffeine dependence continued to consume caffeine at an unsafe level. The reasons given for their failure to cut back on caffeine include severe withdrawal symptoms, functional impairment, or cravings as reasons that they continued to use the substance. Now, I was pregnant twice. Nobody ever asked me about my caffeine consumption. Now, back in the day, I didn't overly consume caffeine, but I don't ever remember my OBGYN asking me how many cups of coffee did I consume in a day or how many sodas did I consume in a day. So I think this is based on recent research that shows that this is actually a clinical disorder, and so people are being more mindful and they're asking those hard questions. Now, as a mom, I would have a hard time admitting that I would not forego caffeine for the health of my child because of the withdrawal symptoms. I mean, I never had to go through that, so I don't really know how I would react to that, but it just seems a little bit selfish that, you know, they tell you, don't do this. Now, I have known young women who, you know, did recreational drugs and drank alcohol and all that kind of thing. They found out they were pregnant. They stopped. They stopped cold turkey because they were concerned about, you know, having a healthy baby, which I applaud that. And I would just think that caffeine would be a whole lot easier to give up than alcohol and recreational drugs. But, you know, to each his own. So how much coffee is allowed, or how much coffee is safe? So the caffeine content in a cup of coffee is roughly 100 milligrams. However, that can change based on the type of coffee, where it comes from, how it's roasted, and that kind of thing, and how concentrated it is. So a single shot of espresso in the United States is usually 1 ounce, and it contains about 63 milligrams of caffeine on average. But this can vary. For instance, caffeine levels in a Starbucks espresso are often higher, nearing 100 milligrams per ounce. Now, I don't think anybody's going to drink an ounce of coffee, right? When I've seen people at Starbucks and they want, you know, a single shot, double shot, triple shot, those are the espresso shots, right? So you're getting all of that caffeine in a greater amount of beverage. And a study in 2011 from Glasgow, Scotland, found that large espresso sizes of 43 milligrams contains 140 milligrams on per serving on average. That is way over the 100 milligrams per cup. Typically, a 12-ounce soft drink contains 23 to 83 milligrams of caffeine, which most colas contain 36 to 70 milligrams. So that kind of gives you a perspective. I know we're talking about coffee, but basically we're talking about caffeine. Energy drinks are even more. All right, a single bottle or can exceed 350 milligrams. So, many prescription and over-the-counter medications for headaches, cold, asthma, appetite control, and fluid retention also contain caffeine, the amounts ranging from 16 to 200 milligrams per tablet. So if you are one of these people that you're listening to me and you're going, oh, heck, I'm drinking more coffee and I do have those withdrawal symptoms and blah, blah, blah. Factor in also how many sodas you're drinking. Factor in also these medications that you may or may not be taking. So you could be really doing a lot more caffeine than you're aware of. Until I read this report, I wasn't really aware that you could get caffeine in your over-the-counter products. Of course, no dose and that kind of thing. Yes, I knew that probably had caffeine in it, but I don't do any of that. So this is not something that's on my radar. I don't do painkillers. I don't do any of this. So this was something that was, oh wow, this is important information. So the dietary guidelines for Americans recommend limiting daily caffeine intake to no more than 400 milligrams, or roughly the equivalent of 3 to 4 cups of coffee per day. Well, I am well under that, so I'm very proud of myself, okay? Lena Begdesh, a registered dietitian and associate professor at the Health and Wellness Studies Division at Birmingham's Decker College of Nursing and Health Scientists, says that people are more sensitive to caffeine. Similarly, Schiefers said that they prefer everything in moderation. So we're not saying, unless you're on a protocol here, that we're asking you to do a gut reset program, and we will say, please, no caffeine, no alcohol, no soda, no grains, no processed food, all the big list, okay? So if you're doing that kind of protocol, then yes, we need you to limit all of that. But that's not real life for every day. That is a short amount of time, 63 days, and then you can, moderate what you're doing and get within those guidelines. So I don't want you to think that I'm the kind of person that's saying you can never have chocolate, has caffeine. You can never have a soda. You can never have a cup of coffee. You can never take whatever you take because of the caffeine in there. What I'm saying is be mindful, because if you are taking more than 400 milligrams per day, then you could be setting yourself up for a problem with caffeine, and that can turn into a clinical disorder that has all kinds of negative side effects. Weight gain being one of those, okay? So, lots of information. I still am going to get up in the morning and enjoy my cup of coffee. It is a ritual. I enjoy it. It's part of my day. If for health reasons or fasting reasons or whatever, I decided to forego that, I could forego that and be just fine. All right. I don't overly consume coffee, but I do know people that do, and it is now listed as a clinical disorder. So just kind of be mindful where you are, adjust where you can, enjoy if you can, but if not, make those changes so that you can live a healthier and better life. So it is the weekend, and what do I always say? I always say relax, rejuvenate, restore, replenish, all those good things. I'm going to do that myself, just kind of, get out of sympathetic dominance, get into parasympathetic mode so that my body can begin to heal and do all the things that it needs to, and yours does too. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for liking. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for doing all the things that help us to get the message out. And I will talk to you next week.